Hi everyone. Apologies, I was trying to help Lucy access this evening session. I managed to end the session throwing myself out. So as I said, tonight's session is with Lucy Stevens, and she's the director and co-head teacher of the new school. Lucy is going to be joining us from her personal profile now. So we should be able to have her join us shortly. Um, I'm very excited to hear about the new school and its unique and different approach. Brilliant. Here is Lucy. Fab. Let me add Lucy. It's saying Lucy's unable to join on her profile as well. I can add everyone else, which is really strange. Ba-dum-bum-bum. I think what we might have to do, Lucy, because I can't. Oh, I can add the new school now. So bizarre. Let's see if this works. It says that it's waiting for the new school to join. Hi, everyone who's coming back. Thank you for coming back. Hopefully we can get the technology working and speak to Lucy. If we can't get the technology working, what? We're working. Yay!
Hello. I'm so sorry about my lack of technical skills.
No, I'm so sorry because I was like, this will be really easy. It'll be fine.
Yeah.
It's intuitive.
Turns out it's not. So I tried to do it on my computer, which I think maybe didn't like it. So I've switched to my phone. So hopefully we're back in action.
Brilliant. It's so good to have you here. Thank you for persevering and thank you for coming back. We really appreciate it. And I've given a bit of intro to you, but I guess if we start at the beginning, what inspired you to create the new school, and if you could tell us a bit about it?
Yeah. The story often makes me sound really old. Back in the day when I was a teacher, so I left teaching quite a long time ago, because there was just too many young people in my class that were just square pegs in round holes, and I just felt like I was attempting to just shoehorn them through an exam system that was demoralizing at best, but brutal at worst. And at the time, I wanted to create something that would focus more on sort of mental wellness, on relationships and partnerships with adults, and support them almost to sort of game the system, as it were. What could we do? What was the minimum we had to do to pass this exam, but also retain a sense of who I am as a person? But I started to realise, early on that actually it's the structures within the education system that make it impossible. The system of assessment, it's the lack of cultural awareness, the hidden curriculum that dictates, what you can do, what you can say, what you can wear, when you can go to the toilet. So that kind of authoritarian structure and that adult lens that dictates young people's wants and needs really for them. So I just started to think about what it would be if I recreated the system myself.
That's amazing. So when you started thinking about how you were going to recreate the system yourself, what I guess were like the first principles or the first like building blocks that got you going? Because it's obviously it's one thing to think I want to change this to being in the amazing position that you are now, where you have a school.
Yeah. Well, there's a reason that I like the name of your organisation. It was about young people having a voice. Like, what is it look like when their voice is in a system? It's their education, obviously, and I think, it's very. We typically think of young people on this trajectory to adulthood, sort of adults in the making, and forget that young people are kind of here and now and themselves at the moment, and so, and I think it's the constant trying to take off that adult lens of what they should do, and think about creating an environment where they can sort of explore and be themselves, and also learn, but yeah, in a way that they're engaged and have a voice in that system.
That sounds amazing. Like even as an adult in the workplace, like I feel like that lens is on me, like you're saying, like adults saying what you
Yeah,
should be doing on that trajectory. Like that's something that then lasts with you your entire lifetime, and to break that cycle or be empowered to manage it at such a young age must be so just, yeah,
yeah,
empowering.
yeah.
Why do you think it's important that children and young people learn these democratic skills and have these opportunities to have a voice from such an early age?
Um, well, I mean, I think it, like I said, young people are in the kind of bit here and now. They have an identity. They're not just kind of these mini adults that everything has to be done to. And we obviously need to acknowledge that there's certain skills that we learn. That we need to learn, social and emotional skills and things, conflict resolution skills, and we can attempt to teach them, in a lesson, because we all recognise that to live in a society of people who are all different, different thoughts, different feelings, different ways of being, that it obviously helps if we've got some of these skills, but to me it just doesn't make logical sense to create a system that squashes all of those skills and then teach them as an add-on, part of the curriculum. It's much more important to learn these democratic skills through living them, because ultimately, if we all want that, and everybody says we want to live in a democracy, but we don't practice it, and rarely actually do we even enact it very well, to be honest. So yeah, I mean, I think ultimately it's what society says that we ask for, but we need to model it and live it to make that happen.
That resonates massively with what we're trying to do. I have a voice in terms of engaging people with
Yeah.
democratic systems. One of the things that I often hear, particularly from our youth ambassadors, actually, is that their curriculum doesn't cover topics that are really important to them individually, but then as a generation, there are topics that are much more pertinent now than they were when I was at school. And given that you involve your students in decision-making activities so that their voices are heard, what are they telling you, and what do they want from education, and then how are you embedding that in what you do?
Yeah, I mean, for us, obviously, it's really important that young people have a voice and a choice in what it is that they engage with, and what they learn, recognizing that we also want young people to be literate and numerate, and sometimes those things aren't necessarily always what would be chosen, because they're hard, but we kind of think of it as co-production. What are we co-producing together? So here's what we can offer you, and here is where you can push back, you can challenge that, because also there's some elements of the curriculum that is it's cultural capital, and actually for some young people, perhaps if you don't explicitly mention and teach certain things, then that disadvantages them, but equally we can do it with a much more critical lens, and with much more flexibility in the result. It's not just learn this and regurgitate it here. It's like, okay, well, have we, what project are you doing? Oh, have you heard of such and such, or have you read about that in the news, or do you know who Martin Luther King is, whatever it is. So it's important for us that we introduce ideas and thinking that young people might not have come across, but our young people have also got a lot of time and space in the curriculum to self-direct their learning as well. So there's a lot of things that they ask for in that time. Some of the time they just want to do their own thing, another time it's we need more Lego, or we want someone to teach us Dungeons and Dragons, or we want to do gardening or plays, because we have some workshop sessions as well. So we've got space for all of that to happen as well. And then sometimes we can use, so our process of decision making is sociocracy, so it's a non sort of hierarchical decision making structure. But within that, we can support more formal learning, but ensure their voice is in it. So, for example, last week, class 2 had a big discussion on, how do they want to be given feedback on their work? how do they want it marked, what things are useful to them, and they came up with everything from, we want a circle put around grammatical errors, or what can I do better, written at the bottom. But the important thing is that they all consented to that. They all had their voice in that, and it's their choice on how they wanted to receive that feedback. And so then they've all consented to having that feedback, as opposed to a blanket policy of we all use a purple pen and whatever it is.
No, that's so important. And again, like, that's something that stays with you forever, like these lifelong skills, like how you want to be given feedback and how feedback works in like every environment, to be empowered to know that that's something that you should be brought along with and bring other people along with you. It's just so amazing. You mentioned at the beginning co-production, and it's a word that I've heard quite a lot recently, but I don't know really what it means. Could you give like a quick explainer of co-production, other than obviously it's people co-producing?
Yeah. You know what? Actually, it's a term I've totally co-opted from. So I was speaking at the Losing Control Network event last week, and it was on co-production. And initially I wasn't too keen on the term, but actually I find, when we talk about democratic education, what is democracy? Now, like, people don't actually always know. And even when you look at the research, there's at least 8 different theories of democracy. So I often don't find that word particularly helpful to explain what it is that we do. But actually, when I started playing around using co-production, and for us that captures that partnership working that we're striving for. So it's like, it's fine for teachers to have an opinion and to voice what they need, and that, I'm here and I legally have to teach a maths lesson and it needs to be in, like this, but actually you can decide these bits and these bits and these bits of the maths lesson, and now it's your self-directed learning time and you can choose X, Y and Z. So it's just that constant, it's conversation, I think, and a partnership, and a supportive structure that enables self-identity, I think.
Yeah, that's really helpful, thank you. And it leads really nicely actually into my next question, which was another amazing thing that you do at the new school is you really strive to support your students to develop the skills and the learning that they need to be inclusive and responsible members of society. What does your vision of an inclusive and a responsible, maybe democratic, whether we use that word or not, given society, what does it look like?
That is a big question. That's a big question. So inclusion for me is, again, back to everyone has got a voice, and everyone is able to participate, and has space to be themselves. So that can encompass anything at our school. So it can be, everything from has a young person been able to access that literacy lesson? Did we have everybody's voice participating in that? And if not, why not? Through to, does every young person feel safe enough and have the social and emotional skills and learning that they need to be able to have a voice in that space? So, it's a vast spectrum of what I mean probably by inclusion there. But that, that extends out to adulthood as well. And then responsibility for us is freedom, but not license. So, it's fine to absolutely have an opinion, to do something that you choose, but not if it impedes on the freedom of somebody else. And then that for us also extends to causing harm. So, we have a responsibility in our school to be accountable to each other. So not to cause harm, but obviously, conflict happens. So when harm does occur, to resolve it in a way that transforms that relationship, transforms that space, so that everybody has a better understanding of where everyone's coming from and what we can do to actually address that harm. And I think that's one way that our school is very different. So because that is essentially our approach to behaviour. We call it community accountability. But yeah, I think that looks very different.
Yeah, that's amazing. And certainly when I've been working with young people, I find that they can have political conversations when they're at opposite ends of the spectrum with very little, like with it not being competitive. Like that
Mm.
was learned.
Yeah.
So how, like on a, like what does conflict resolution look like with the young people to do it in this community way? Because it's so different to then the way that kind of we think of conflict
Yeah.
resolution as adults.
So at a basic level, it starts with just hearing each other. So, you know, a conflict's occurred, and you know, they might need a cool-off period. They might need, and then a teacher would support them to resolve that conflict. So, you know, I might say, you know, Rebecca, what did you want to say? Is there anything you want to say? And you might share, well, actually, I really wasn't okay when you just hit me or whatever. And then you're asking the other person to reflect back, you know, what actually did you, Lucy, what did you hear Rebecca saying there? You know, it really wasn't okay that I was near her, and you know, she didn't like it when I touched her. Okay. And then, you know, the other person, and so everyone feels heard, but you've also got that reflective piece, so you're grounding it in understanding of, you know, what's the actual meaning here. And even if someone doesn't want to talk, you know, I'm noticing he doesn't want to say anything, does Rebecca's body language tell you anything about how she might be feeling about this? And you can always check in with, you know, does that sound right, Rebecca? You know, have I does that sound like what's happening? Yeah. And then when you've got to that level of understanding, then, you know, the solution part is easier. So, okay, so what do we need to happen now? Like, do we have a solution going forward? And then, you know, that's something they can start to generate themselves.
That's so great that you've got space to do that.
Yeah. And then at a bigger level, you know, if something becomes much bigger, whether it's, you know, a bullying thing or more physical violence, then that's a longer kind of restorative circle process. And you know, at the higher level, it would be a transformative justice session with you know, a parent, a supporter parent. It doesn't have to be a parent, someone that they want to support them in that sort of circle.
Yeah. And mentioning parents, do you engage parents in the same way that you're engaging the young people in what you do as a school?
That is the aim at the moment. I mean, we've only been open 5 weeks, so it's very new. And so we are just embedding kind of our structures and what we're doing with young people, and holding that space. But yeah, after half term, like we'll start to have like a parent circle, so they can bring their voice in. And you know, I'm sure we've got so many skills and things within our parents that we can, you know, use to support kind of the curriculum or what it is that we're doing. You know, I know that we've got like a set designer, and you know, someone that's like amazing at knitting, and you know, all of those things. So yeah, it's important to have the parent voice in there as well. Although we do also, you know, it's young people, it's their space, so it's important that they get to say whether it is okay for their parents to be coming in, and you know, because sometimes, you know, parents can be really keen and excited, but actually, you know, it detracts, or it's, you know, it's not the young person's space then when their parent joins.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Definitely. I've got a couple more questions for you, but one has come in through the chat that I might just jump to quickly. And if anyone else has any questions, feel free to type them as well. So the question that's come through is that they find that there's a lack of diversity, particularly racial diversity, in democratic schools. Could this be because of the lack of understanding of what democracy is, or why else do you think that might be the case, or do you find that to be the case?
I think the main reason is that democratic schooling in the UK is an alternative education system, and it's fee paying, so it cuts a large section of the population out, and because of economic inequality, that tends to be ethnic groups that are not white. So I think that's the main reason. We're actually a bit of an unusual school in that we're non-fee paying, so our demographic looks like a comprehensive school. I think it's probably also fair to say that with the, you know, the inequality that we have, particularly in the UK, that you know, one way out of that for non-white or other people, any people of colour, is the exam system and getting the right grades to try and progress that way. So I think, you know, that to some extent an alternative model that may risk that can also be problematic.
Yeah, that makes sense. You've mentioned exams a couple of times, and you mentioned that you opened 5 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Both of these are hot topics at the moment, given everything that's going on with the pandemic. How are you coping with opening a school in the middle of the pandemic? And obviously, like, if more schools did what you're aiming to do, maybe there wouldn't have been the exam chaos that there was, because we wouldn't be as reliant on this one day of sitting down and doing the paper.
Yeah, well, address the pandemic first of all. That was slightly unforeseen, I think, for most people as well. Wasn't top of our risk assessment when we started that last year, but yeah, I mean, in some ways we perhaps it's slightly easier for us that we're a primary school at the moment, because we're growing up to 16. More of the restrictions are for secondary, but also we're one bubble, so because it's quite a small school still at the moment, so that actually helps us as well. Obviously, if we had a positive case, we would need to close, but so I think that's helped us, and then just touch wood, it's been fine at the moment. But yes, the exam fiasco, I think we would absolutely back a scrapping of our exam system. I think that would be literally the one change that I would make to education. The number one, the first change, a lot of changes, but the first change would be literally to scrap our exam system. The assessment structures of education, from reception baseline to year one phonics to SATs to GCSEs, A levels, and then add value added and all this are what perpetuate the disadvantage within education, and the incessant drive to close the outcomes gap. It is that's one of the main problems. So with a rethink of assessment in place, frees teachers to be more innovative, to try new things, to develop the curriculum, to be more critical with the curriculum, to listen to young people. So yeah, I mean, absolutely, the assessment structure is one of the main ways our education system is stuck and can't change.
Yeah, that would be so fundamental. That was one of the questions I was going to ask you, and it's great that it's come up naturally in conversation.
Yeah.
I'd been thinking about an answer when I asked you that question, and it's so entrenched in me that exams there. I hadn't thought of that. As soon as you said it, I was like, of course, that's the one thing that would just fundamentally change.
Yeah.
We've had a question from Anna, and Anna said, how do teachers in your school adapt if they've come from like a state school environment, which I guess you did yourself as well? Like, do you almost have to retrain them out of everything they know and their approach to teaching?
We recruit for values. So, we interviewed across the board, and the thing that we were looking for most is that reframe on young people's voice. If you've got that, then it doesn't matter, because actually we need good teachers, so teaching isn't the problem. Absolutely, our teachers are brilliant. Some of them have been in mainstream, some of them haven't, but all of them were looking for a more hopeful way of approaching education, and it's that lens shift. It's the lens shift that's the thing. It's not and the awareness of why the structures of education disadvantage. So they were the two key things, and with that, then actually, all of the teachers teach very slightly differently. They've got slightly different styles, but yeah, on the whole, they all value and want to hear young people's perspectives.
That's really great that they have those shared values. And I would guess, taking the leap to a new school, that they maybe share some, like you mentioned, hopefulness about the future of education. We have a question from Catherine, but before getting onto that, I wanted to ask kind of, what are your ambitions for the new school? I know you're only 5 weeks in the open, but to do this, you obviously do have this hopeful vision, and you touched on a few things, but what's your ambition? What's next?
So the reason that we're essentially creating an alternative model in action. So it's like saying, you know, this research is here. This isn't just out of my head. You know, it's, well, I mean, some form of democratic education predates the 1900s. You know, it's not a new way of thinking. And, you know, even if you looked at papers on disadvantage and the outcomes gap, you would see the same things, you know, disengagement, all of that side of it. So for us, we're demonstrating that this model that can work. You know, we absolutely can hold the school accountable. We can demonstrate outcomes. It's just a much wider range of outcomes. So we've built an alternative outcome structure that holds us accountable to young people having a strong sense of agency. And by that we mean, you know, they've got goals, they've got a sense of purpose, and they've got all of the skills and competencies they need to achieve that. So we've got 4 key outcomes that we measure: self-esteem, self-efficacy, educational engagement, and life satisfaction. So much broader range. Our whole model maps to that, to those outcomes. So here's our model in action, and then our aim is that we now use this and those outcomes to challenge the educational narrative in the UK, and to say, you know, this isn't alternative, it's not radical, it's common sense. When you think of actually what we're asking, you know, we want young people with 21st century skills. We want them to be able to resolve conflict. You know, we want them to know who they are and have a sense of purpose. Why wouldn't we teach that? Teach it like that, you know? So yeah, that's where we're headed.
That sounds amazing. Like, definitely signed up to that revolution.
Yeah.
One of the questions we've had from Catherine is there anything that has surprised you about what you've seen in the first 5 weeks? I'm sure that this was like so long in the making, and the dreaming and the thinking, and you've had 5 weeks of children in classrooms.
There's been many surprises. No, one thing that surprised us actually was in the first, so we've got quite a cross section of young people from homeschoolers through to mainstream. So we've got both sides of the coin. But one thing that surprised us, the first week we spent a long time building that sense of community, and you know, relationships and things like that. And particularly the older ones are saying, when's the learning starting? Like, when can we do the lessons? And they wanted it, and they wanted that structure. That's what they were asking for. So that was a bit of a surprise. And then
how did you respond to that?
Sorry?
How did you respond to that?
We put it in. Well, works for us. Fine with that. Yeah. You want some lessons, we can teach you. We thought we were being, you know, very relaxed to kind of ease them in, but actually, yeah, they were asking for it. And what has also surprised us is in the self-directed learning times, a lot of young people have no idea what they want to do, no idea what they're interested in. And having that freedom, they're walking around saying, I'm bored. And that was surprising. So for some young people are asking for more structure, and others are asking for less. So it's just being flexible to that level of need, and you know, saying, okay, so in your time, what are you interested in? Would you like us to support you doing a project in this, or you could go to this workshop? Whereas others are quite happy to, you know, just run with it and you know, go and choose what they want to do at that point. But yeah, those are probably 2 surprises.
That's so important, because I think about, like, you know, once you enter the world of work, like, there are jobs with structure, but careers are ones where you realize what you're interested in, what you enjoy about your job, and you take that and you run with it, and someone sets parameters, but within those parameters you just find your projects that you go with it and you run with. So having the experience to do that at school and maybe flounder for a bit,
definitely.
Sounds like it's a really, really useful thing to do.
Yeah.
So I have one final question for you to give the last word to you. And for those who tune in regularly, you will know what this is. It is, can you finish this sentence? I have a voice.
I have a voice when I'm in an environment that allows me to be me.
That's a brilliant response.
Short and sweet.
What you're doing. The shorter and the sweeter, the better. You know, that's such an important message, because yeah, a lot of times people aren't comfortable using their voice when they feel uncomfortable, and that's why often in conversations it's the loudest, shoutiest voice rather than perhaps the one that maybe more people would agree with or want to hear from.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you know, that's really key in our circle times and things, that we it's really important that young people learn to not talk over each other, and that everybody, we work in circles, so everyone knows that they've got a turn to speak, and then you can actually sit back and listen, rather than the loudest person having the floor the whole time.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Thank you so much for such a great session. Thank you for persevering with it.
No, I'm sorry. It turns out my computer does not like Instagram Live. But yeah, thank you very much. It was lovely to be invited.
Yeah, thank you so much. The next Autumn of Advocacy session will be a lunchtime session, and it's going to be with Welcome. They support researchers to take on some of the biggest health challenges that we face, and campaign for better science, which is very, very relevant at the moment. So that's happening on Tuesday at noon, for those of you around and able to join. But one last time, thank you so much.
No worries.
Thank you. That was a really great session. Thank you. Bye, everyone. Have a lovely evening.
Bye. Bye, everyone.